Hello and welcome to this energy talk here at European Utility Week. And I'm joined now on this panel where we are talking about intelligent asset management or digital asset management, or all of those words in front of asset management. But the point of the panel is to really dive into why this is such a hot topic at the moment and how within an energy perspective you should start looking at intelligent asset management and what you should be thinking about when you start going down on that journey. But before we start, I'm going to get each of our panelists to introduce ourselves, and then we'll go into the panel session and hopefully have a good debate as well, and not just talk at you. So start off with you, Jeroen.
Thank you, Adam. So I'm Jeroen Vergauwe. I'm a partner within Deloitte, responsible for our asset management services in the EMEA region.
I am Kaspar. I am Chief Technology Officer and member of the board for Electrilevi, which is Estonia's largest DSO.
Karim, Jawad, good afternoon. I'm the European Sales Manager for Copperleaf Technologies, a Canadian software company focused on asset investment planning and management.
So I love this panel. So we've got the product guy, we've got the consultant, and we've got the consumer.
So let's sign a deal together.
So that kind of works, right? Now the question is how do the three of you get together? Now let's start a little bit. Kaspar, if you can tell us a little bit about your journey as a consumer of it, where it took you, and what you had to do to get the most value out of the technology. Because technology is technology, it can do pretty much what we want it to do. How do you drive the car?
All right, so to give a bit of a background, we finished smart metering in Estonia last year. So we have 100% smart meters. We have been doing a lot of interesting asset management analytics on the medium voltage side before that, but this is now the first time when we have, on an organizational scale, sort of took the objective that we are now going to use the smart metering as a core pillar for digitalization of all of the business processes. Hence, going beyond this kind of meter to cash philosophy and then moving on to asset management. And
so you're using the meter data as a core building platform for your asset management. I mean, it does the billing stuff, right? But let's forget about that for a second.
Yes, it's the core data source for really implementing new use cases into asset management, like predictive maintenance, for example, which I think is one of the more straightforward than things which you really should be doing. And we have now worked on this for 3 years. So we have gone from piloting to a working application to now having really this interesting experience about how to integrate applications into real-world business processes. Yep. And here in the end, I guess the lesson learned boils down to the fact that investing in tools is easy. Straightforward enough. Data, integrations, user interfaces, but using it is hard.
So when you say hard,
yes,
is there a story you can share about how hard actually means? Because you do have, in a technology paradigm, people jump on it. We had cloud computing. But what they never really explain, that's all well and good, but you need to change some of the skill sets, you need to change some of the behavior, you need to, in order to get the maximum value, you need to train people to drive it in a different way, to think in a different way. Can you share some stories on that side of things?
Yeah, I can.
Are you allowed to?
Yeah, sure.
Good.
I mean, so when we began, and we first landed on our first interfaces and sort of understanding that what kind of a meter event signal pattern would mean a transformer about to blow, this kind of thing. Then it's interesting that in these first piloting teams, the people who come together are in a sense special people. They're people who share skills, a bit more deeper skills in their domain, in their expertise. They have usually a bit more background either in IT and programming or mathematics, and they are practical. And when these people get together, stuff starts working. But now, when we've piloted it and we've sort of proven to the organization, great, this is a great thing, and if we use it, it works, then you kind of find out that these people don't fit into the organizational structure at all. And if you now want to say, take the head of operations and say, this is your new tool, go for it, then he says, but my workforce is, here's some 50-year-old guys and here's some young stuffs and they take it easily, so how do we do this part? And then if you just, from the technology point, then stop and say that's your problem, then what happens is that the tool doesn't get used to the effect that it should be used.
Yeah.
So what we've actually had to do is rethink our entire approach to data science or data usage in general. And what we've learned from other systems also is that the key issue for us is how to maintain the context, the domain expertise in the analysis of the data. So what we have initially thought was that maybe we need to train our people. Actually, we have now kind of reached the conclusion that we think it's a bad idea. Because training people is hard and it takes time. What they really need is a good domain expertise mixed with good mathematical skills and good computational, ways to do that. So we're actually now focusing more on developing the tool set to better harness or integrate with the domain expertise so that training is needed less.
Gotcha. I'm going to give you a break because you've set us up really, really neatly. Jeroen, does that resonate?
That resonates very much. So that's something we also see in the implementation of projects we are doing, that when introducing new technologies, and those new technologies are improving, making more efficient the work they are used to do, they are happy with it, and that's easy for adoption. But sometimes, and we see that people don't realize always with implementing this type of tools, it's also changing what they are doing, and this is more disruptive for them. So then you really get into the, let's say, the change challenge. If my role and my responsibilities can change by that implementation, I feel more danger about it. So we see more reluctance in that field. And so with this type of implementations, it's not only, let's say, making processes as is more efficient, it also changes the way of working. And then we see a lot of reluctance on doing that. And also cannot agree more than on that besides a tool, you also need to start to build those new capabilities in the firm. So the capabilities in order to absorb what has been changed, the way of working that has been changed, to also be able to work with those tools. So it's also much of a capability building exercise that needs to go together with the type of system implementation. So
yeah, and Karim, I bring you in as, what you guys do is you create this platform for digital asset management. The things you've heard here, first of all, are those things you see your clients go through and experience? Mm-hmm. And what's your role in the entire process in terms of someone who's a solution provider, right? Because at the end of the day, it is in your interest that these solutions get adopted at scale, and then the market develops and people get more comfortable with it.
Well, I think you first just briefly need to focus on what is the reason to go and invest into this. from a utilities perspective, it's a changing world, and it's a continuously changing world. I mean, let's say, hypothetically, tomorrow everybody's driving an electrical vehicle, for example. What is the impact then on the utility, whether that's distribution or transmission, okay? And then there's also a new development where customers are actually shifting off-grid. So you don't even have a stable outlook, for the next 5 to 10 years. Actually, which utility is able to clearly identify to you what their program is going to look like, for the next 20 to 30 years. So we're in a changing world, okay? So I would say that's one of the reasons why there's an interest for digitization and IoT. You need to take decisions. You've got a whole different mix of type of investments that you can do. You can think about, storing energy in multiple ways. Yeah? So basically, you've got to maintain a grid, which is getting out of date. It's got older assets, and IoT will help you to pinpoint exactly which assets need to be serviced sooner versus the other. And at the other side, you've got a dimension where you are expanding your grid, but you're taking it into multiple directions. There's a lot of diversity in terms of investments. So this is where I would say, aside from tools and technology, there's also new ways of working, like ISO, for example, ISO 55000, in terms of principles that you can adopt as a utility to help you take those decisions. Now, people that show interest in this from a utilities perspective will say, this is great, we need to do this. But is there an existing tool or platform that already has, some of these models, is it already pre-populated? Because if you think about the whole exercise of doing consulting and building this up from scratch, we're talking about something, that's going to be years away before you can actually have the benefits, of that type of a solution. So obviously something that was grown inside, utilities, that was built together with them, that already has pre-existing models, will diminish the amount of time as well as new roles, because let's face it, a data scientist is something that's very new to a utility, right? This is something that, okay, you did analysts, you had analysts, but a whole division of data scientists is something completely new for a utility. So what I'm hearing is that, as opposed to doing everything on your own, there's also, can I leverage on lessons learned from other utilities to shorten, the whole cycle of getting this up and running and taking the benefits from that.
So, but even when you have a platform like that, you must surely still experience the challenge of driving it, and how big an issue was that? I mean, when you first went to your board and said, look, we need to invest in digital asset management, how did you build the business case? Because you didn't know half the stuff you were talking about just now. You didn't know that, hang on, we got to change culture and everything, and then that becomes a very complex business case. Oh yeah, we're going to invest in digital asset management, but then we need to change the culture. And if I know any board in the world, they're like, you know what, that sounds really difficult, right? How did you pitch it?
So Estonia here is a separate case.
Right. You made it easier for yourself. You got a regulator to say do that.
There's a thing I would call digital cowboyism.
Right.
So there was first the decision to do the meters, and then in the midway through was the decision that, well, we've done the meters. So in that sense, in our boards, it's more like we should do it because we should do it. So in that sense, it's nicer.
So you leapfrog the business case phase.
So we leapfrog, but we do have to show we're very practical in that sense that we prototype fast, but then in order to go to really roll out, let's say, predictive maintenance, and then really do a network discovery center that would be responsible for generating real usable work orders to asset management to say, yes, these transformers, to go there, we still have to, work out the business case to a very detailed level, and then we can do it. The acceptance has been all right. The main problem, which it boils down to, is the interface between technology and people. And the issue that organizational change timeframes are high. If I want to put together a team of data scientists, that's a year or two worth of project. If I now, in the middle of that process, figure out that perhaps this is not the smartest idea, and perhaps these data scientists should be with a different profile and perhaps spread among the business processes. That's another 6 months, that's another year, that's another time when you have to have a conversation with you. So what's my career here, and all these kind of things, and trying to get a good development environment for the application where the business requirements stay still enough. This is hard. So in the end, for us, it boiled down to integrating technology within the organization into one entity, bringing it to the board level, and making a board level commitment to redesign the organization, and sort of understanding that the middle management will not be properly positioned to do redesign efforts that affect them either structurally or politically in ways that might create motivational hazards.
You're nodding your head.
Yeah.
So does this really have to go up to board level?
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that. What we see in utilities are those decisions are both taken from a strategic point of view. Because if you're looking at challenges that are ahead of utilities, like aging assets, digitization of assets like the smart meters, but also all the assets being equipped with sensors and this type of things, but also the integration of distributed energy resources, also the adoption of electric vehicles. Those challenges are so huge, you don't even talk more about trends, these are just realities. And so it's from a strategic point of view that the companies feel like we need to engage in that, because we need to face those challenges, and we need another approach to that than we've done it traditionally. Because if you look at before, like the grid part was maybe the most boring part of utilities, but now it's really the center of innovation and where modernization needs to happen. So we see it's really more taken from a strategic point of view, and then of course in the rollout of the program, use cases follow a business case approach, but it's really like it needs to be supported top down and then build up from the bottom to make it happen. That's actually what we see.
And in a way, I mean, we call it asset management because that is functionally what it is.
Yeah.
But the real value is in the data that that you are now able to mine and do predictive maintenance on and all those things. Karim, from your experience, and you work with a lot of utilities, I mean, can you just bring to life a little bit about, your product aside, but the type of intelligence and the type of value that lies in that data, and how you've seen utilities apply that data? Because a part of me feels like asset management is a bit of a term from the past, but it's the best one we've got.
No, I think it's a very correct way of talking about it as something from the past, which is because it is from the past, and given the constraints that Jeroen was just describing, as well as the other examples that I was given, you need to take a different approach, and suddenly that digital asset becomes very important. Okay, and knowing what the condition is of your asset, its deterioration, and what is the lifespan, do I need to replace it? It all became very relevant because you have to do more with less. You have to take your grid into all kind of different dimensions because electrical vehicles and all that. So suddenly this is the center of attention. Yeah? And we see that simply from the rise and the adoption and the expansion versus having that same discussion 10 years ago. There's been a major shift. So it's not so much a discussion about should I do it? No, you should, but how do I do it? And I think from that perspective, I agree with Jeroen, and I am also agreeing with yourself that you cannot have kind of an open-ended approach to this. It needs to be use case driven. The board would like to decide on something that has proven its value with other utilities, preferably, okay? And some thought leaders may say, well, let's be the champion and we'll go do the investment into that area. But many of those things, they just get to the level of a pilot and then it all stops, right? I mean, this is something we've heard many times. So I think the interesting thing here, and also for this show, is that you see here really more companies, including the one I represent, that have a use case driven approach, where you can put the business case ready on the table to make the decision shorter and say, okay, let's go for that because we're interested in something that can deliver us value, and not having an open-ended discussion on hiring a whole army of data scientists and not even knowing, if it's going to deliver any value.
So where is that value? I mean, there must be a sort of killer use case. I mean, I pick out predictive maintenance because that seems to be one that, when we analyze all the case studies in this domain, it's the one that has a lot of commonality. I mean, you do a lot of this work, right?
Yes,
so
we
you're
do,
probably better placed to tell me where those killer use cases are. So if anybody's watching, it's like going, is it predictive maintenance? Is that a good one to start with, or are there others?
But it's definitely a good one to start with, but there's also, of course, others. So we are engaged in many of our predictive maintenance cycles, and especially for instance on grids, where you can, based on more granular insights on your assets, can have a better, let's say, targeted maintenance and replacement policies. You can easily save couples of millions, so that's easy to do. But also, not only on the maintenance part, but on having a good view on your grid performance and doing simulations on, for instance, where do I see bottlenecks appearing in the grids when we integrate distributed energy resources, or need to integrate also electric vehicles on the grid. Also, this type of things, you can use data to give those insights to better direct your investments into that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities, and not only limited to predictive
But
maintenance.
would you say, Jeroen, that it also depends on the maturity of the utility? Because one utility, to be fair to them, might not even know even where their assets are, or actually have it properly registered. Whereas the other one has, done, a significant investment on that side and has a very reliable data. I think this also depends on, how mature is the utility in that space, whether or not, certain use cases can deliver to them immediate value or not. I think we have to be honest about that.
Yeah, this is very true in the sense that like the smart meter network is, if you have them and if you have well-structured data and combine that with a well understanding, you have an asset condition database, something to model conditions against. This is the foundational level, and I think actually many utilities are still at the foundation level.
I fully agree on that, because one thing is always about data. First, is it available? But we also see is what's the quality of the data, but also what's the perception of the quality of the data.
Yeah.
And in most companies, it still stays with a perception of the quality of it, because we've seen many utilities telling me, yes, but we are not ready for that because we don't have the right data and the right quality of the data.
Yep.
But when you investigate and we make it more objectively, we can prove what the quality exactly is, and then depending on that quality, you can start to build, let's say, use cases. Because one use case doesn't need to have that 90% or even 100% data quality to already prove business value. So it's rather building trust in the quality of the data, and making that first step, maybe not a quantum leap to do that, but build the step, and also creating that awareness around data, what you can do with it. It's also, and it's like data management is also not a cost, it's an investment with a return. And this also philosophy that also needs to go not only from the boardroom, where you maybe start with your large business case about digital, but also bring it to the field worker to convince him that also data quality is his responsibility. And that's a big difference, because I'm being paid for doing my job, and that's technical, and not on registering data. And then you need to explain them, it has value, but also show them from use cases the results to convince them with your data registration, you really contribute to the company, so it's essential. That's also part of the change process.
You're nodding your head, you've seen
we go back a number of years, so and we've done our things on predictive maintenance, but I definitely agree, and actually it's the same thing that you started saying at the beginning. I think if you take a use case driven approach and you go and sit down with the people that do this on a day-to-day level, try to help them to improve their job, and gain those efficiencies, or do an innovation, a big mind shift. You need to work with the people that are doing this on a daily basis, right? And it may not be such a big exercise, but it becomes, from my perspective, and I think Jeroen, you'll agree on that, is that if you just kind of push it in and say, look at all the benefits of big data, that might work, for this utility, but it might not at all be applicable for those, for those others. And I think there's a little bit danger in there. There could be some hyping, but there's definitely a benefit for utilities to gain the experience of what other utilities have done, take a use case driven approach, to help them to take this to the board, to get their consent, and to work with them, because each utility is an island on its own, with its own characteristics, with its own different grid, with different regulations in a different country, and you need to take that into account. Okay, so it's you need to be willing to invest together, into looking, what is the optimal fit.
So, as we're kind of coming to the end of our time, let me ask you this as a group, and then we'll go into a sort of a wrap up. You mentioned regulation, and there are certain regulatory environments where the value of a utility is inextricably linked to the assets it
Yes.
owns and runs and operates. One of the tenets of digital asset management is you go out with the soundbite that, hey, you can reduce the number of assets and do more, right? And there are quite a few utilities that are within that sort of regulatory environment. What does this industry say to those utilities in terms of how do they go to the board? Because going to the board and saying, hey, guess what, I found this thing, it's going to reduce the number of assets we've got by 20%. The CEO goes, well, the shareholders ain't going to like that because you've just dropped the price. I mean,
Okay, but what we see is that utilities move from managing assets to managing systems.
Right.
So they provide functionalities to the market. And it may be with less assets, but they need to provide a certain functionality. For
so
that.
is it a repackaging of the term? You say you to the regulator, I've still got the same asset because I'm still providing the same functionality, or?
But functionalities can change with the same asset.
Right.
So if you need to provide some backup capacity, we also will start to charge that, not in the regular way where it has happened before. So that's the big move on that, and they really see themselves moving to managing those asset management systems that rather like individual assets. That's what we see.
As well as allow for the creation of new business models. It took two guys and a good idea to take over the whole world, in the taxi business. There is, let's say, enough people that are experienced with key knowledge inside the utility, whose knowledge and experience would be very much welcome in other places in the world or in other industries. Okay, so this also allows them to do, a shift basically in their business model. That I guess is also one of the opportunities there.
I would say to that, I don't think it's a real problem in that sense that the regulatory models are different and they incentivize different things in different markets. But the data is going to have use cases everywhere. They might be different, but the underpinning architecture is going to be the same, and the main pitch, as you said, to the board there is, what was already mentioned is that it's a changing world.
Yep.
So you're going to need some use cases to pay for the investment. However, there's another aspect there which you're investing in, which is difficult to characterize, but it is your ability to adapt as a utility to fast-changing conditions which you have not experienced before. And these conditions, having this type of data-based asset management, intelligent asset management system, they allow you to change strategies on much shorter timescales with much less human interaction. So, just to give you a visual example, the first time we saw our network interruption numbers built up from the meters themselves, where you can not just having a number for the network, but having a individual number for every city, for every week, whatever you want to, however you want to see it. That significantly changes the way you can think about, driving that indicator to certain targets at the end of the year. So this type of flexibility is hard to classify in business numbers, but from a strategic point, from this gut feeling which everybody has in this energy space at this point, as you said, it's a changing world. I think that's the pitch.
Yeah. But could I ask? Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't want to hijack. But you're just mentioning something interesting.
Yeah.
But you're essentially saying I would only like to focus on change management as being the biggest, let's say, investment that we need to do. as opposed to having to do change management, building platforms, seeing if you can even build a business case around that. I mean, if you add all those additional things in there, it's going to be like an undoable exercise. And what I'm hearing you saying, just checking that, is that you said, I would like to focus on the change management side, which is something that always needs to be done, because what we're doing is disruptive, definitely.
Yeah, but in a way, it's what you're saying is, I'll bring you in, and do you corroborate that? I mean, because what I hear, and just to finish us off, what you're saying is that all of this is a fundamental platform for a utility to navigate the future energy paradigm.
Yeah, that agility is indeed needed, and you need a robust platform to, in a flexible way, to react to that. So we like as today, we cannot foresee what will happen in 1 year. We can do some simulation on scenarios, but still you will need to respond to a particular scenario that happens and be able to simulate that and to react on that. This kind of platforms can help with that, and providing that flexibility and agility you need as a utility in the
Perfect.
future.
And I think on that note we leave it. I think we've come to the end of this panel session. We've covered this exhaustively on NGRT. We've done a number of webinars on it. We've talked about value and how you align values. So for those of you watching it here, you've seen one part of our intelligent asset management program. On the website, it all pulls together. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for watching.